Welcome, 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 and thanks for tuning into the Talent Empowerment Podcast. We are here to help you find happiness, and we are going to unpack the tools and tactics of successful humans to help you guide towards your own empowerment in your career. I am your host today, Tom Finn, and on the show today, we have a financial wizard, Bryan Kuderna. Bryan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Tom. I don't think I've been called a wizard yet, so that is a good title. I like that.
Well, it just sort of hit me as I was getting to know you through your background, and
I hope it sticks.
Well, we got a lot of wizardry questions to ask you about the financial world. And as a certified financial planner and the founder of Kuderna Financial Team, you are the expert in this space. So we're going to dig into all of those things.
Cool.
If you don't know Bryan, he's been named one of New Jersey's top 10 financial professionals in 2021 by NJBiz. He also hosts a popular finance and business podcast. So check out the Kuderna Podcast when you get a chance. This will be a little appetizer, but the main course is certainly with Bryan on his podcast. He's a regular contributor to CNBC, Newsmax, Yahoo Finance, and AARP of all places as well. His first book, Millennial Millionaire, was launched in 2016, and that launched him into a speaker role, speaking at colleges, hospitals, corporations, financial institutions, and also paved the way for his second book, which I want to get into as well. What Should I Do with My Money? Economic Insights to Build Wealth Amid Chaos. So let's get right to it. How is this discussion going to make me rich today?
Yep. Yeah, that's the $1 million question right there, Tom. So one thing, just to set some context, like I always tell people that there's rich people that work really hard and make a lot of money. And then there's wealthy people who work really hard and then their money makes a lot of money. So when we look at those two categories, I think most want to be in the wealthy category. And another thing I often say is that wealth, I don't just look at it in the monetary sense. I look at it from where the etymology of the word wealth comes from, weal, an Old English word, which actually translates to a state of well-being. So when I counsel clients and everything, of course, we're talking about money and their financial plan, but I think that well-being, if we think of that as the true definition of wealth, that's what we're all after. And we can certainly dive into, the how-to of financial planning today as well.
Yeah, so what does well-being mean to you? Because for me, it means happiness, love, balance, money. It's probably all of those things, spirit, health, those type of areas. What does it mean to you?
Yep. So, one of the things I do in my book, I reference when I read a book about the CIA way back when I was in college. And they actually teach their spies when they're going behind enemy lines to be what we call moles. And you may be wondering where I'm going with this. I'll explain. So when they teach these guys like how to be the best spies in the world, they say chase the mice. And mice stands for money, ideology, compromise, and ego. So these four motives are something that are inherent to all of us as human beings. And one may kind of trump the other, as life goes on and the ebbs and flows. But that's the way that I view wealth is, what does it mean to me in the context of money, ideology, compromise, and ego? And for me, it's all about balance. Money is just one spoke of that wheel. For me, going back to that state of well-being, it's about being happy with my family, being comfortable where we're not in a state of stress. We know that we have a process that we're following and just kind of removing a lot of the what ifs so we can focus on the important things, which to me are, faith, family, and just going out and having fun and traveling and seeing the world and helping my clients, of course. That's kind of the win-win that I get to enjoy.
Yeah, that makes all the sense in the world, but I imagine that most people come to you for the fiscal component of it first, and then the other pieces make sense because they're derivatives of the fiscal component. So how do people that you work with make money?
Yep. Yeah, so that's a great question, and that's true. They see me as the financial advisor. That's obviously where it all begins. That's kind of my domain that I get to help with, in mice, if you will. So when we're talking about money, I essentially have a 5-step process that I use with my clients, and it goes protection first. All right, that domain is speaking to insurance, life insurance, disability insurance, group benefits, understanding all those things so that come hell or high water, we know that their family or their business is going to be okay. All right. So that's number one. You're only as strong as your weakest link. Let's protect everything first. The second is going to be liquidity. So cash is king. How do we set up a budget? How do we make sure we have the right amount of money in the bank, our checking or savings, et cetera? I know I sometimes tell clients, they're like, wait, that doesn't sound like a real investment piece of advice, which it's not, but cash is an asset class of its own. And I sometimes say it's like a necessary evil. Yeah, it doesn't keep up with inflation, doesn't do anything fancy, but if we need it, we know it's there, and that's the value it brings. So protection first, build liquidity. Third one is debt management. All right. We can only do so well if we can kill it and get a 10% return, but then we have, a line of credit or a credit card at 18% that's dragging us down. It's like we're trying to swim upriver, and those headwinds or currents are just too strong. So just to recap, protection first, build liquidity, manage our debt, then build wealth, all right, which is starting to create the plan and the accounts that we're going to utilize. And then the last one is growth. And I think that's the one that gets the most attention of kind of, what are the ingredients that go in the recipe as far as the stocks, the bonds, the funds that we're going to use, the real estate. So that's all well and good, but we need to set that foundation. And then once we know that's all in good order, that's when we go to that last one where we really get to kind of play with some levers there, which is on the growth side of things.
Do you feel like people have shifted away from stocks and bonds over the last 20 years, or is this still a mover and shaker market that people are interested in?
No, without a doubt. I mean, if you look at just the volume that's in the stock market, it's as high as it's ever been. And I think one of the reasons you see that, and I talk a lot in my new book about this, is the entitlement programs, that folks have relied on for so long, be it Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, under a lot of downward pressure just because of the population dynamics that we're living through right now. And what was kind of the precursor to that was defined benefit pensions. So back in the day, people could retire and say, all right, I got a big pension from the government or my big company I worked for. I'm going to collect Social Security, and now I'll kind of sail off into the sunset and, do whatever I want to do. As Social Security faces, certain solvency issues, as pensions have, kind of faded away in the past 20 years, more of the emphasis has been driven towards, people having their own responsibility to kind of create their own plan, hence the rise of the 401k, the IRAs and such. And so where that money is going, where it's guided to is, of course, the stock market through mutual funds and so forth. So I think the stock market, it's huge. It's as big as it's ever been. It's the ultimate measure of liquidity in our economy. Bond market, a little bit different. That's had quite a history in the past decade, which we could talk about, but they're definitely two critical components of a financial plan.
Yeah, I love that you talked about pensions, because this is it's like an old world, pensions. I think there's still some public sector employees and some labor unions that have pensions, but for the most part, we're on our own these days, right?
That's right. I mean, unless you're the police officer, the teacher, or, there's hardly any private companies, frankly, that have true pensions anymore. So the ones that do, they should be very grateful for them. They are a great financial vehicle, very difficult to fund, especially with people living longer and longer, and inflation adjustments being included in a lot of them. So if you have one, that's awesome. To replicate that, it's a tall order. And that's what I spend a lot of my time advising my clients on, is how can we kind of fill that void, which is doable. It just requires a little bit more creativity and discipline on the part of the individual.
So for most of us, we have a 401k, an IRA, something of that nature that helps us for retirement. And we take money out of our paycheck at some percentage, and we dump it into this vehicle that should be at some point tax efficient for us. And ultimately, we want to watch that thing grow.
Sure.
There's an alternative view that I've heard from many entrepreneurs that say you're wasting your time. You should take that money, invest it in either a singular stock, not diversify, or invest in real estate and have the capital asset, watch that grow in a different way. What's your take on how to retire the right way?
Yeah, it's a good question, Tom, and I just want to preface, that I'm not giving any particular advice today. Every situation for everybody listening is, I'm sure, unique, and
Yep.
they need to seek their own advisors and such. But with that said, I think the 401k, the IRAs, they still have a place within a plan. Where in that regard, I really advise my clients a lot to consider, Roth IRAs or even Roth 401ks, which is an option that's become very popular within 401k plans. Because I always say, not only do we want to diversify our assets, we also want to diversify our tax bill. The last thing we want is to retire, 20 years from now and say, okay, I got close to my mark with, building my portfolio. But the way in which it's structured, maybe it's all tax deferred. And so we have an investment partner in that plan, which is Uncle Sam. And he gets to call the shots the whole way. And we don't know what taxes will be in 3 years with a new administration, let alone in 20 years, depending on what's going on in the economy. So you have to take a lot of things into account, besides just the actual investment, but the vehicles that are holding, these investments. So that's one thing that I always try and make people aware of. The second, to your question about the entrepreneur, if it's investing in themselves and their company, I agree wholeheartedly that, they know themselves better than anyone else. So that's the beauty of being an entrepreneur, is that you can control your actual investment. So I would agree with that. Now, if it's just saying I want to invest in a stock, just a Johnson & Johnson or a Nike or whatever, because I have stock options there and that's 80% of my portfolio, those are some things you have to sometimes be careful of, because when we're all in, on one individual security, that does bring about a lot of risk, in the sense that, maybe we're saying, hey, I like the tech sector, but if we just have one stock within that tech sector and then they have, a bad, thing in the news or a bad quarter, now our whole portfolio could take a dramatic turn. So that's where diversification still certainly plays a role. And then the third thing I think you asked was in regards to real estate. I love real estate. I'm a real estate investor myself. If you're going to go it alone, like outside of a REIT, a real estate investment trust, where you're actually going to be the holder or the landlord, there's just a lot of added layers to that versus just managing a traditional investment, which I'm happy to talk about. But, I like real estate. One thing, a very big client of mine that has a lot of properties had told me early on, he said, real estate is a patient way to get wealthy. And I think he hit the nail on the head with that. You've got to be able to ride it out. You need to have a certain level of liquidity to be successful in real estate. And if you just look, apples to apples, at the appreciation in real estate versus, say, the S&P 500 over the past 40 years, the S&P blows it out of the water. So there's different ways to make money in real estate, but if you're just looking at appreciation, the stock market is probably still, tops, over time.
Yeah, so let's go back to this idea of REIT versus owning real estate. So talk about maybe some advantages that people think about when they're looking at a REIT, kind of what they might be thinking about or looking for.
Yep. Yeah. So a REIT, again, it's a real estate investment trust, and it's a way to invest in real estate without getting your hands dirty, per se. So you can, be actually a little more specific, kind of like you would with mutual funds. Where you say, hey, I don't want to just invest in the stock market. I want to invest in biomedical devices or something. You can pick a fund that caters to that. Similar with REITs, you could say, okay, I want to invest in commercial real estate that's in, urban areas. Or you could say, I want to invest in real estate that holds cell phone towers. You can do things like that where you can kind of pick something where if you said, hey, I'm just an average Joe out there, I've got, $10,000 of extra money I could work with. I'm not going to go out buying cell phone towers or some huge corporate park in Manhattan, but I could do that through participating in a REIT. So similar to just how you would with a mutual fund. Now, what are the downfalls versus if you actually own the real estate? When you're a real estate owner, you have, all the benefits of whatever the profits are within that. So there's not fees and things like dragging you down. When you say to a tenant, this is what the rent payment is, and you know what your mortgage and your carrying costs are, you could see exactly what your profit is and have a lot more control of the situation. So, that's what's great. But I mean, like I said, I have a lot of rentals. When somebody calls Friday night saying, the water main just broke or whatever, now you got a problem to deal with, where with a REIT, you're never, ever going to get that call. So that's where there's some differences.
Yeah, and real estate has made a lot of people in this country very, very wealthy over a period of time. But I love the way that you said it's a patient man and woman's game, right? Like you've got to chill and sit on real estate for a while. The other thing that maybe people think about is selling and gaining access to that capital again, or that cash, taking a profit or a loss on the real estate. Or, you can always refinance, right, in certain markets. But, a lot of people thought that for a long time. And now with 7% plus interest rates, a little harder to refi.
That's exactly right. And that's what I often tell people is, when real estate's working well, it's awesome. I mean, I could just rattle off the benefits.
Yep.
When real estate's not working well, it can be almost like a nightmare sometimes. And you saw a little bit of that right now with the hike in interest rates. You really saw it come to light, in 2008, where it was actually a true real estate driven crisis. So you got to keep those things in mind. I mean, one of the great benefits to investing in real estate, there's a whole host of tax advantages that are unique to real estate. And it's also a great way to get leverage. When you look at, good debt and bad debt and everything, most financial experts will say, the best debt you could carry is going to be a mortgage. It's a secured debt, usually with a lower interest rate, and some tax advantages available in certain cases. And so it can get you can go buy a $500,000 house and say, all right, I'm going to put, $80,000 down and have a $500,000 asset that you're able to work with. So, you can't really do that in the stock market. So there's a way to get really nice leverage there. But you got to be careful, and that leverage can work both ways. When it's going up, it's like a supplement, like a steroid that's enhancing your gains. When the market turns, it's the exact opposite, where now it can accelerate your downfall. And that's why I keep going back to liquidity and patience, because yes, real estate over time usually goes up, but that doesn't mean that there's not going to be cycles and downturns. And if we ever have to liquidate in any downturn, that's the worst case scenario. So you got to keep that in mind.
Yeah, and you use this word patience, Bryan, which I feel like as a market, as an economy, as a culture, certainly in the United States, I feel like most have lost patience in terms of their wealth accumulation, in terms of what they expect to receive as a salary, what benefits they expect to receive from their employer. I think people want more and more and more and more. Maybe that's my cockeyed view of the world, but for now, that's the way I feel. What's your take on investing and patience? Do you feel like people are less patient?
Without a doubt. And you can almost say it factually at this point. And I don't want to go so far as to say like we want instant gratification. But I think what drives a lot of that, and I talk and I write a lot on this, is, back in the day when mom or dad or grandma or grandpa said, you know what, I'm going to go make an investment. They had to go through the process of finding their broker, calling their broker, placing a trade. They got that one security. They got a certificate in the mail. They see, maybe 2 weeks later, in a quarterly report or in the Wall Street Journal, okay, it's at that price. You had to do a lot just to kind of keep up with it. And so, but the good thing was that kind of being numb to it allowed the product or the investment to do its work without your interference. Now, all of a sudden, I can go right on my phone. I can check up to this second my account balances, my stock, what's going on. I can turn on the TV behind you and I can see 10 different channels shouting at me, what's doing good, what's crashing. And as you take in all this noise, it plays with our psyche. And you start to see like, oh, I'm up today. Oh my gosh, I'm down today. What am I going to do? And this emotion gets involved. And I always tell people emotion and finance never, ever mix. So that's what really, and that's why I have a job. That's why the financial advising market is as strong as it is. I can sit here and write this book that I have called What Should I Do With My Money and lay out exactly what to do. But it's the human nature to kind of get pulled away And then that's what complicates matters. And that's what takes something that can be kind of simple and make it, just all these added layers of complexity that then we have to kind of bring it back home. So yeah, I think, there's just so much out there in the media and social media that everything happens at breakneck speed, and you expect that of your financial plan. And that's not always realistic.
All right, so you went there, so we'll go there together. You talked about your book, What Should I Do with My Money, which is out and available now. What should we do with our money? What is the book going to tell us?
Yep. So what the book tells us, and I'm very clear right up front with the intro and the author's note, is it's more of an economic literacy than a financial literacy book. My first book, Millennial Millionaire, was a little bit more of kind of the memoir, the how-to, this is what to do with the money. This one, What Should I Do with My Money? It's answering a lot of the whys of, why does the construct that we live in today, how did we get here? How is it working? And what's the future of it look like? And then where do we fit into that? So I think when you answer those whys in economics, it gives us the conviction and the understanding to say, okay, I'm designing a plan, and now I'm going to stick to it because I know why I should stick to it. And so that's what's so key, is the discipline. And that's why I talk about, entitlements, education, big tech, economic philosophy, the environment, all these hot button issues and how they kind of come together. And then the last chapter is financial literacy. And that's when we say, all right, now that you understand what's going on out there, and now that you're kind of in the know, let's bring it back to you and what you're actually going to do with your money and create a plan. And then you can identify. So it's a way of thinking so that in the future, now we can identify where the opportunities are.
Yeah, I like the way you explain that. So you're really going into the macroeconomic components of the markets and what moves and what shakes and how this all works together. What's your take on some of these other asset classes like Bitcoin?
Yep. So and I get a lot of questions on that. Not as many as I did 2 years ago, I will say. But, with cryptocurrency, I wrote a paper when I was at the University of Economics in Prague. This was in 2008. I wrote a paper in which I said that at some point the world will speak two languages and have two currencies. I said we'll speak English and we'll speak Mandarin. And this is just as a kid, I'm just writing this. And I said, we'll have a US dollar and then we'll have, the Chinese currency. And just because I felt like with globalization, the world was becoming so much smaller. And so as we fast forward now, 15 years later, I think cryptocurrency is almost like an iteration of that, where it's like, all right, we have this one universe that we're living in, that we're transacting in. And what it's doing is it's kind of, in theory, it's giving all those countries that are not the US or China, or that maybe don't have such a strong economy, an opportunity to partake in just a level playing field with a level currency. Now, so I think cryptocurrency as a whole is kind of here to stay. Which is going to be the winner, which ones are going to survive, I think is a story still to be told. You see there's just so many out there. And it's no different than like when we had the dot-com bubble. We said, wow, the internet, this thing's crazy, but I think it's going to work. And then everybody and their brother threw a .com after their name and it blew up and then it contracted. And I think you're seeing the same with cryptocurrency. I think you're going to see the same with AI. But with crypto, the thing I'm a little bit averse to, it's still very much unregulated. If you see, in my book, when I get into the tech sector and in war, and we talk a lot about cyber warfare and stuff like that, a lot of the nefarious actors on the internet, almost everything that they do is to be redeemed in crypto. That's done on purpose because there are so many different layers to it. It's hard to see and identify these people. So I think there's a lot to still get straightened out there before it becomes mainstream. And then the other thing on crypto too is I think when people invest, Warren Buffett always said, invest in what you know. And a quick story, when he invested in American Express, all right, at the time people said, I don't know about this credit card thing. I think it's gonna, pass on. He famously went to a department store and he asked one of the people at the counter, one of the clerks, can I just stand here and just, I'm an investor. Can I watch how things transpire throughout the day? And he said everybody and their brother was swiping their credit card. And he said, all right, some of this fear out there, it's not founded. The credit card is here to stay. You could see the people using it left and right. They like it. And he continued to invest heavily in Amex and did very well with it. With crypto, I'm not seeing that yet. I hear a ton about it, but my buddies, my friend, my mom, my aunt, I'm not seeing them transact daily with crypto. And that's what gives me a little bit of pause at this stage.
That is a beautiful explanation of the difference between credit card and crypto. I think the other piece of crypto is it's this dark universe for many that they don't understand what's behind it. A credit card, in some form, there's a bank system behind it that we, do or don't understand at some deep level, but there is a monetary system behind it that makes sense to people. I think when you see so much wealth being created in the crypto market, and then you see that wealth disappear overnight for many, right? It can feel a little bit like a yo-yo. And,
yes.
And you use this word, and you only used it once or twice. You said regulation. So there's a lack of regulation in the space that, for me, feels uncomfortable. When people are saying, I want everything in crypto because I don't want anybody to find out what I'm doing and I don't want to pay taxes, that to me goes, okay, we're probably not there yet.
Correct.
If that's the model that's become the underpinning for this type of market.
Yeah, it's still very speculative. Doesn't have a strong footing yet. I think it needs to get there. And when crypto explodes, and I ask people, even other folks in the media, I'm like, why'd crypto go up so much this month? I don't get like a uniform answer of this was the appreciation of the asset class. Well, why did crypto, crash this month? Again, it's just this emotional thing where people are almost kind of gambling on it and then panicking, pulling out of it. And you're not seeing like an exact tie to an asset that is, oh, this is its balance sheet, this is its worth that's going up or down. So just by nature, I would still say that that's speculative.
Yeah, I think you're right on, man. And there's more creative ways to make money, although it is hard when we have short attention spans and we see everybody else getting rich, right, in air quotes, off of crypto at some point, and they're driving around in their fast cars saying, all I did was invest 10 grand in crypto and now I'm rich, right? I mean, it's sort
funny
of
because even on my podcast, like sometimes I'll ask the guys that come on, I'm like, what's the best investment you ever made? What's the worst investment you ever made? And you would be surprised of very smart, very wealthy people have said crypto on both sides. So it's like, all right, how is this thing the best investment you ever made for this guy and the worst for that guy when it's the same exact thing? It's because of those time frames that, we're holding it in.
Yeah, it's timing, right? It's I've got to get in at the right time, and then somehow I got to get a little bit lucky and get out at the right time, which has not necessarily been the case in the stock market. I think if we look at it over 100-year span, right? If we start to go back, there's more predictability in the stock market. But you tell me, is there more predictability in the stock market?
Without question, especially if you're comparing it to crypto. I think Steve Jobs on your shelf back there, and I'm a huge Apple fan. You think about it, if I pulled 1,000 people that knew of or invested in Apple, I bet I'd find like a big swath of people that say, hey, Apple was my best investment I made. Very strong company, long-standing history. I'd probably find very few that would say Apple's the worst investment I ever made. And so that, I think, is what you can see a little bit more out of the stock market, especially when you're dealing with the blue chips or, the S&P 500. So I think that's where it has a place. Now, what I often tell my clients is like, if we had point A and point B, and, here you are at A and here's B, when the kids are going to college or when you're retiring or whatever that time frame may be. If I said that, we can get from A to B and B is satisfying that goal that you want, and you could just kind of close your eyes from now until then, could you do it? And nobody can. They're like, well, where's it going to go? I want to be able to see it. I want to be able to feel it. I want those statements. I want to look at it. And that's what's so tricky about the stock market is it's not just this linear path. And I think, frankly, if you ask a lot of people, we could go from A to B and it'll just be a linear path. But then there's this alternative where we can go up and down, and you might way overshoot B, but you might, fall under it. A lot of people are going to be lured into that. And that's what the stock market is it's this thing that's constantly kind of promising, big gains. But then, news that, is whatever sells, maybe some fear in there. And it's like the guy that wins is the one that can say, like, you know what, I got a plan, I'm going to let it do its thing. And those are usually where you see successful investors.
You're so funny when I'm listening to this. I'm hearing this model and I'm thinking, is that the model for entrepreneurs? Is that what they think? I'm going to go get this big return. I'm going to be an overnight success after a decade, by the way. You're an overnight success after a
Yep,
decade.
yep.
And so you do this decade of work and then boom, the big money comes in and you're retired early and you have the freedom to do what you want versus I'm climbing the corporate ladder. I'm investing appropriately. I'm gaining big chunks of income as I get promoted. I move around the country, whatever it is, to make a little more dough. I start getting into the stock option pool where I'm at the executive level and I'm ripping stock options off the table. Is there one way there that's better to make money than that you've seen? So I'm sort of comparing and contrasting startup life for entrepreneurs versus a traditional, big corporation role equivalent.
Yeah. There's plenty of opportunity in both, Tom. And that's what I tell people, especially like sometimes when I'm brought into colleges and I do a talk or whatever. And, you get these young guys, go-getters, young guys and gals, and they're like, I just don't know really where I want to go. I don't have that direction yet. And what I like to see them do is like a personality assessment. And if you're the person that up and down, like we were just talking about the stock market, where that would just start to make you sick to your stomach. And you're like, there's no way I could do that. And you just want that stability. As you go through that, you're going to start to see that you may be a better employee. And we need really good employees, and employees can climb really, really high.
Yep.
So know who you are. And if that's your role, then go there and be the best you can at it. And all along the way, keep that 20% savings rate that I always preach. Invest, have a plan, stick to it. And know that you're going to be the best version of you and it's going to work. Now, if you're the other person that says, I want bigger and better and I want control. I don't want to just kind of leave it out there and not have a say in the matter. And you're that type A personality and everything else. It's not all about money. You're going to know you want to be able to wake up and kind of control your own destiny a little more. Then that sort of person is speaking more to the entrepreneur, the commission-based, someone that has, more eat what you kill type of mentality, then that's the route that they should go. So both of them can be fantastic. It's just kind of knowing yourself and then where to really, put yourself in the best environment.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. So where do you fit on that equilibrium or that scale?
I'm 100% on the entrepreneur side. When I was growing up, my dad worked for the Army, my brother followed suit, and I kind of saw where it was like this environment where you could work your tail off, but like, Joe over there, he's not quite ready to retire. So, but hang on another 6 years, you might be able to apply for that position. And I'm like, no way. I'm like, that's not me. If I can work my butt off and prove I'm killing it versus Joe, then how am I not getting that job or moving up? And that's where I'm much more in kind of the entrepreneurial realm where, I wear a lot of different hats from being the author, the financial advisor, the investor. And I like that. I don't fit into just like a small box. I knew that there's a lot of different things that I want to do. So I could be a good employee, but I might not be happy. And that's where I knew that I had to kind of go that route where I have more independence. I could build my own practice and then pursue other things that I want to do.
Yeah, so I want to touch on that just for a second. Having a diversified portfolio of things that you do doesn't just have to be money based is really important for people. And I think what I'm hearing you say is part of the value you place on your life is being able to do different things and explore different areas of your brain and your soul and be able to contribute to society in different ways. Would you agree?
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, there's so much more to the world than work and money. Again, it's one critical thing. Money is involved in every decision out there. That's why I wrote this book on it. That's what I try and help people with, is to kind of remove that so you truly are financially free. And then once you are, that's where me personally, I have plenty of other pursuits from my family through sports and, I like to have different goals out there and different things to do. And that's, to me, that's like the spice of life is being able to constantly keep things exciting and not feel that sense of kind of like boredom or complacency. Not everybody's different, but that's kind of, what gets me going.
Yeah, well said. Bryan, this has been a fantastic discussion. If people want to get to know you a little bit further, maybe they want to work with you, they want to check out your book, they want to listen to your podcast, where do we find all that information?
Sure. So you can follow me on social media on Twitter and Instagram. It's just Kuderna. If you go to my website, bryankuderna.com, and that's Bryan with a Y, you can find out a lot of like my latest findings, what I got going on. Sign up for my newsletter, Weekly Wealthy Wisdoms, just a short newsletter where I kind of share all this of how I think and how I think people can better their lives. And then lastly, I think my book encapsulates everything. I'm really happy how this book came out. Again, it's What Should I Do With My Money? I promise it's, I have a lot of takeaways there, a few years of research in it that I try and, make very digestible and entertaining. So check all that out, and probably social media, you can contact me, and I like to try and keep it back and forth with everybody too.
Yeah, beautifully said, my man. We will put all of that in the show notes so that those of you driving don't have to try and write down what he just said. You can go into the show notes, click away, and get in touch with Bryan. This has been an awesome discussion, man. Thank you for your thoughts. Thank you for the good work that you're doing in the financial realm and also in other areas of literature and education for our communities and our country.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Tom. This was fun.
Yeah, and thank you for joining the Talent Empowerment Podcast. We hope you've discovered perhaps your true calling, learned about some investments, understood yourself a little bit better. We'll see you on the next episode of the Talent Empowerment Podcast.